Hot on the heels of the RTX 4060 Ti, NVIDIA is releasing the RTX 4060, a more budget-conscious version that is targeting 1080p performance. Does the RTX 4060 bring the value and the performance to compete with AMD's latest offering, or is this simply an RX 7600 with DLSS? And when comparing partner cards, is there a standout between all of them, or should you just buy whatever's cheapest? Taking a look at our latest test system, which includes an Intel Core i9-13900K, 32GB of DDR5 6000 memory, the latest drivers from AMD, NVIDIA, and Intel, as well as Windows 11 with VBS enabled. Moving over into the benchmarks, and we can see the RTX 4060 is just a little bit faster than the RX 7600. That does make the RTX 3060 about 15% slower, and the Intel Arc A770 about 5% slower. Moving up the charts, and we can see that an RTX 4060 at reference specs, represented going forward in green, is the slowest variation of all 4060s, though the performance between all the partner cards is pretty much the same. The interestingly named Zotac RTX 4060 Spider-Man OC is 1% faster, the Gigabyte RTX 4060 WindForce OC is 2% faster, and the ASUS RTX 4060 Strix OC and the MSI RTX 4060 Gaming X are both 5% faster, being the fastest 460 models available. That being said, they are still not faster than the RTX 3060 Ti, which is 11% faster than a reference 4060, and the 4060 Ti is 23% faster. Moving over into ray tracing performance does help the RTX 4060 compared to the RX 7600, which is now 21% slower, though the RTX 3060 does pretty well, only now being about 14% slower with ray tracing enabled. The solid wall of partner cards are all grouped very closely together, being at most 4% faster. The RTX 4060 Ti and RTX 3060 Ti, though, maintain their leads at 29 and 11% faster respectively. Bumping up everything to 1440p, though, does group the cards a little bit closer together. The RX 7600 is now just 2% slower than the RTX 4060, and the RTX 3060 is 12% slower. The Intel Arc A770 is now firmly sandwiched in between all of the partner cards, being 2% faster, while the fastest partner card is 4% faster, while the RTX 4060 Ti and RTX 3060 Ti maintain their lead again with 24% and 15% faster respectively. So while these cards are not designed to play at 1440p, it doesn't mean you can't, since we are still getting about 70 FPS on average, even with the slowest model, though compared to the two cheaper competition, the RX 7600 and the RTX 3060, they're both above 60 FPS, so not that different. The RTX 4060 Ti, though, delivers 85 FPS on average, so a much smoother experience. For those of you brave enough to game on this card at 4K, though, what can you expect? Well, the RX 7600 does fall a bit further, now being 9% slower, and the RTX 3060 does do a little bit better now that it has the 12GB of VRAM, now only being also 9% slower. The Intel Arc A770 slingshots past all the partner cards, now being 11% faster, and the RTX 4060 Ti, which is also not designed to be a 4K card, now only ties the RTX 3060 Ti, being about 20% faster. Still, even at 4K, the frame times aren't too bad, being above 30 FPS even for the 1% lows, so a very console-like experience. The RTX 3060 Ti delivers 40 FPS, and the RTX 3070 delivers almost 46 FPS. So none of these cards are really that great at high refresh gaming at 4K, though if you were willing to sacrifice some settings, you should be able to achieve 60 FPS pretty easily. Power consumption has been one of the ways this new generation of cards has differed itself from the previous generations, and the 4060 is no different. With an average gaming power consumption of under 130 watts, it's much more similar to the GTX 1660 Super than it is to even the RTX 3050, and much less than the RTX 3060 and 3060 Ti. It also uses less power than the RX 7600 from AMD, a card that's normally a few percentage points slower. In terms of performance, the Intel Arc A770 is pretty close to the RTX 4060, but in terms of power consumption, it is using about 100 watts more. In terms of the partner cards, the PNY RTX 4060 Accelerate does the best, using just 123 watts while gaming, while the ASUS RTX 4060 Strix OC actually does pretty well considering it is one of the fastest cards available in the 4060 lineup, and only uses 128 watts. So in terms of efficiency, the RTX 4060 does pretty well compared to the older generation of cards and the contemporary RX 7600, though compared to the rest of the NVIDIA lineup from this generation, it does do the worst. Locked to 60 FPS, the RTX 4060 does only use 70 watts of power, which is better than the RX 7600 and even the RTX 3070, but again, compared to its NVIDIA contemporaries, giving the same level of performance, it uses more energy. In terms of partner cards though, the ASUS RTX 4060 Strix OC and the PNY RTX 4060 Accelerate both do a little bit better than the stock cards, using 65 and 66 watts respectively, which is a little bit unusual considering that both of them are overclocked. Both cards also do very well when it comes to fan noise, with ASUS, MSI, and PNY all having models at roughly 25 dBA or less. Using the standard BIOS does push the ASUS models up to 31 dBA, so a 7 dBA savings if you decide to go with the quiet BIOS, just a little bit more than the Gigabyte RTX 4060 Gaming OC with its quiet BIOS. Followed by the Gigabyte RTX 4060 Gaming OC with the non-quiet BIOS, the Zotac RTX 4060 Spider-Man OC, the Palit RTX 4060 Dual, and the MSI RTX 4060 Ventus 2X, both around 36 dBA, then the Galax RTX 3060 EX at 41 dBA, and bringing the wind, the Gigabyte RTX 4060 WindForce OC tops the charts at 45.4 dBA. If we normalize for power consumption and noise though, we can see that all that wind is actually needed, since the Gigabyte RTX 4060 WindForce OC is running at 82.5 C, so the worst by far in terms of cooler performance for the 4060 models. None of the other cards differ all that much, being plus or minus 10 degrees off of 60 C, with both ASUS models, the MSI RTX 4060 Gaming X and the PNY RTX 4060 Accelerate, being the top performers. Just to quickly touch on overclocking, all cards achieve roughly the same level of performance once overclocked, being between 8 and 9% faster, so when looking at performance, they should all be about the same if you're willing to overclock. But as I like to say, everything comes down to value, and rounding out the bottom, the ASUS RTX 4060 Strix OC is the lowest value in terms of performance per dollar 4060 card. It is the fastest out of the box and does have the best cooler, but it also does command $90 more than the stock $300 MSRP. It is tied though with the RTX 4070, so it's not that bad a value, it's just the bottom of this chart. Next up we have the MSI, PNY, and Gigabyte Gaming OC cards, each of these in the $320 to $330 price range, which isn't too much to pay for a better cooler, though sadly again you aren't going to get any better performance out of these cards. And then we get to the MSRP cards, which is the Palit RTX 4060 Dual, the Zotac RTX 4060 Spider-Man OC, the MSI RTX 4060 Ventus 2X, the ASUS RTX 4060 Dual OC, Gigabyte RTX 4060 WindForce OC, and the Galax RTX 4060 EX. Out of these cards, especially since they have the same level of overclocking performance, given the choice, I would probably go with the ASUS RTX 4060 Dual OC, especially since it has one of the best coolers available, and again, once you overclock, it'll have the same level of performance. And the Gigabyte RTX 4060 WindForce OC, maybe not so much, given its weak cooler performance. That being said, value hunters might want to consider other models instead of the RTX 4060, at least at the MSRP. Even reduced down to $280, the RTX 3060 Ti delivers more performance at its current $300 price tag. Reduced down to $260, the RX 7600 is still a better value at $250, at least when you're not looking at ray tracing performance. And it's not until you get down to $240 that the RTX 4060 becomes a better value than the RTX 3070. And we could keep going from there. Like what we said with the RTX 4060 Ti review, at $300, it's not a bad deal to get this card, but if you are willing to sacrifice DLSS 3 or ray tracing performance, or maybe both if you're looking at an AMD card, there are better deals to be had for less money. If you are looking for all the bells and whistles though on a new card, the NVIDIA RTX 4060 is the cheapest option available.